so that it's the same whether I draw it here or I draw it here. I want it to be the same instead of reverse. Just as front is the same as back.
First of all, when you need to write design, you're going to write the most convenient, depending on where presumably the arm is. You're going to choose the surface that makes the greatest sense. And so I think if your limb is down near the floor, you're not going to be thinking of a design on the ceiling. And then if you're going to understand directions when you're up, remember, when I rotate my arm out, when it's up above my head, it seems to be in. You have that transformation, which is something people have to learn. That takes place. So you have to only think of the physical activity, and you do the physical activity. And so part of my establishing this idea of if you have a surface for some reason in an awkward place, and overhead might seem awkward, then you get the physical movement in a standard place, and then just do the same physical thing on this other surface.
We only have 2 or 3 minutes left.
No, if you take
I think
this
so.
design,
Well,
We've only been a half hour.
if you take
okay, but in order to give
if you
Ray...
take this design and
Okay.
okay, this design is going to be
Oh,
on
okay.
the floor, but your arm is going to be straight up. Okay, draw this design. Right. Now we're going to have that same design on the paper on the ceiling. Draw the design. No, no, no. Your hand is still straight out.
But then you're not drawing on the ceiling.
Why
do I choose
because,
a ceiling?
Okay, it's because somebody is holding a piece of paper and you've got to draw on it.
No, there's also the perpendicular rule that if the minute it's perpendicular, you know the surface that it's on. So you wouldn't be drawing. If you're here, you're drawing perpendicular to the gesture, which means in front of you. You would never draw on the ceiling if your arm. No.
Yes, you can, because
no. If
yes,
you're drawing.
Sandra, there are reasons you could be drawing on a surface that's on the ceiling.
Give us a solid example, not a hypothetical one.
A solid example is you are having to draw that figure on the shelf right here. You have to create with a pencil that drawing on the shelf, and the result will be an artwork, which you then show to the audience. That's a real example.
Brenton?
Sure.
But then you're getting into broken body.
No, it isn't. I'm not getting into any broken body. It's a surface. It's a real surface.
I understand. I was going to say something else, but let Brenton know.
Brenton and then Sandra. Go ahead, Brenton.
This must be real, because they say good art starts fight in bars. Right? So, I mean, in a way, I think just this kind of a meta statement, I think we have two, not quite irreconcilable points, but two different approaches, each of which is valid. I definitely hear the side about, in these confusing places to practice a movement in one place and transfer it. Makes total sense. I also see the merits of having something as a purely visual representation that you can just map out. I think we won't find any resolution if we go with what feels natural or intuitive, because clearly we have different senses of what kind of makes sense.
That's interesting.
And so given that, then my mind goes to either two possible solutions. One is, just like we have different crosses of axes, maybe we have two different kinds of design drawings in some way to indicate that.
Well, we do actually have that. Anne has brilliantly created in the design drawing advanced book a way of having the surface different and orienting the surface different. And the example has to do with when you're drawing here and then you're moving the paper this way, you have to orient it this way. but as the surface changes, you may want it rotated.
Got it.
So
Got it.
she has a way of doing it.
Okay.
I believe, however, that the standard,
The
when it's
default.
over the default, when it's overhead, should be part of the back of the body half,
Right.
and then it's exactly the same through here.
Yeah.
It's everything being exactly the same except
Yeah.
one switch.
Yeah.
That's all
So let
I'm
me
saying.
just
I
add my
think
second piece
It's a
in.
brilliant
Which-
way. I think it's a brilliant
Okay.
way of adding to the system, but I just disagree with that one surface.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So the second piece is just that, again, in the sense of trying to go with what the standard should be. I mean, I hear two different approaches being argued, and again, and each one has its point. So I don't know if there'll be reconciliation there. But then that asks the question of on what basis is that kind of change made? And I think, Lynne, you're partly appealing to a conceptual symmetry.
Well, I'm appealing to a readability that I found
Oh.
when people read the score. Although the rule states one thing, they read
Yeah.
something very different.
Yeah.
I found.
Okay. So I'm curious how and if we on what basis we would find resolution to this.
Well, also, one thing that hasn't even begun to be discussed is what are the ramifications of having one rule for design going in the sagittal plane and versus the horizontal plane, and what happens when you start moving designs through the two
Well,
planes.
that's all discussed
You haven't
in
even
Anne's book.
begun.
I haven't begun to, and nor do I want to contest any of that. I think Anne has done a brilliant job with getting
but
things
hold
that are
that-
in the back, in the
But I know
That's
what
not
you're saying.
you're not answering my question. You're offering a radical change on just one plane.
Well, I want.
So then how, within the standard system, if nothing else gets changed in design drawing as we understand it, and it's presented in the advanced text, you have not even begun to address the complications that might arise because you're talking about two different systems.
I believe it is more consistent to do it this way.
You
And
gotta-
the reason,
gotta-
the reason I'm saying that has to do with Anne's argument, which was for the front and the back. Anne put forth in the book, and it's in the paper, how something in front of you should give the same drawing as something behind you. And so that when you draw, let's say you're drawing
But
this
again,
M,
my question is when you start doing
you can do it on the
three-dimensional,
other surface.
no, but when you're doing three-dimensional, moving from a horizontal plane into a vertical plane, you haven't addressed the issues because you're talking about two
completely
different
addressed.
theories.
You know
No,
what?
it's not two different theories.
We're not going to read it now because of time issues. But can I pass this out?
Sure.
This is
Can
the
you-
paper.
You seem to understand what I'm asking. Should I?
Well, again,
can you ask
I-
it in a different way? Can you ask my
No,
question
I'm
in a
not.
different way?
I'm not 100% sure. But something went through my mind about the idea of, just when
This
I'm.
plane and
Yeah,
this plane.
right. And when I.
And when they intersect as you're switching through them.
As they intersect,
Yeah.
you'll find in the text, there's an ability to state that the top surface is a different one.
What do you think for your
We can switch
paper?
around
To me,
the paper.
the issue that you raising, I mean, it's not that you have to necessarily address it, but maybe when you bring it up, just say something that we should be considering as we consider this change might be the ramifications it has towards.
Think of a ribbon dance,
That
a
kind of
gymnastic ribbon dance. They are
There you
in
go.
every single plane. If you're, again, I don't
just
know that
means-
you've even begun to address
Sure.
what's going on here.
Absolutely.
No, if there's two different rules as you're
It isn't
following.
two
She's
different
trying to
rules.
make
Exactly
the
the same
rules the
rule.
same.
The same rule is, it's exactly
way.
the same rule. It's just that how you interpret the ceiling surface is the orientation of the piece of paper. That's all.
Well,
That's
but
the
then,
only
but
thing
then
I'm
if you have a continuous things from like back,
You
then evolve
analyze
into.
it. If you have changing surfaces as Sandra indicates, you analyze it according to the rules, the same way you currently analyze it according to the rules, But the way the,
If I go
the
like
design would be drawn, the paper would be just,
So if I go like, wait a minute, if I go like this.
So you'd write it.
Well, just imagine
Yeah.
having a huge ribbon
Yeah.
Yes.
and
it
how they're
goes- and
moving
then it
in
goes
all
up
these
here.
I
different
would be-
directions.
Yes.
And well, the
No
thing,
problem.
the thing
problem.
is,
It's
Well, I had,
the theory's
I
exactly
had
the
that
same.
in Legacy.
Yes.
In Legacy, ribbon dances everywhere.
I'd
I
love to
just
get
drew-
together
and I
with
just
you.
indicated what surface it
What
was,
surface?
Yeah.
Yes.
and just drew it on the surface.
Yes.
And there's no problem because one part of the design leads into the next part,
Right.
leads into it
And you
doesn't
just
go
keep-
like this, and then all of a
well,
sudden.
it might
And
be
you just
useful.
keep flipping the paper.
It might
Right,
be
yeah.
useful in your
Yeah,
example.
you just have to keep changing the surface.
Perhaps it might be useful in your paper just to have an example in which there are
Changes of
change,
Start
you know,
here,
change.
and then you draw it there.
Yeah.
Sure.
Perhaps it might be useful to have it in your paper, just one example where it changes surface, because one can, we're just speculating to say you haven't, well, consider
I
it,
have considered it.
and then make
and
sure to
I
include
believe
that
it's no,
as an example of how this makes it better.
okay,
You know,
thank you.
that would
Yes,
be-
I would.
Yeah.
I
I just
appreciate
want to
your
put a
input.
word in for anybody who's possibly in the future listening to this from ICL, that I, for one, think having this kind of pre-ICL discussions of papers, this used to go on in the past. It happened for me when on my paper that I did last time, and the group here discussed it ad infinitum, helped me to know in before finally when going to ICL for it. And I hope that we could continue this and would encourage people, and if we can facilitate that in any way and add our 2 cents worth about whatever papers you want to do ahead of time, we would love to do it. I'm speaking for everybody else, but
Yes, thank you for your input,
Yeah.
and I'll adjust to include,
yeah.
but, anyway,